Jonathan Swan, welcome to the show. It's good to see you. Some might be surprised to see a New York Times journalist on the Charlie Kirk show, but for those who didn't know and don't know, you and Charlie were actually friends, and you guys knew each other pretty well. I actually know you because of Charlie, so maybe that's a good place to start, because I know you mentioned it in your book, Regime Change, Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. But you talk about Charlie in this book. Why don't we start there?
Well, I got to know Charlie in the way that reporters get to know people, and I just found Charlie to be, I met Charlie for the first time in 2017, so almost 10 years ago. And I got to know him through Trump's first term, as he was very young, building this organization that at the time, not that many people had heard of, but it started to really build momentum. And it was very obvious to me straight away, that he was a very sophisticated and smart operator. I mean, he'd already developed a friendship with Donald Trump Jr., and he was starting to build, at the time, a very close relationship with the president. And so one thing you sort of try to figure out when you're reporting on people who are activist leaders, movement leaders, is are they running an organization that is essentially an AstroTurf organization? And it was very obvious to me that he was not just building himself as an activist leader, as a movement leader, as an advisor to the president, as a fundraiser, but in the view of, I could tell you, quite a few people around Trump, Kirk had a choice. They thought he was either going to be the heir to Rush Limbaugh or potentially the Republican nominee for president in a future cycle. And I happen to share that view. And, you know, obviously we will never know, but I certainly had strongly felt that by, 2022, 2023.
On the topic of JD, there's been a lot made of these scenes in your book from inside the Situation Room. There's a scene with Benjamin Netanyahu pitching some of the intel leading up to the Iran war. You see JD's posture as being pretty skeptical. And I would say that there was a lot of members that were pretty skeptical. I would say, I guess my question is separate fact from fiction. When it comes to the admin's reception of that intel, the players, how skeptical were they? And if in your estimation, why was the decision to go in the second strikes made by the president?
Well, it's nuanced, right? Even the skepticism from the U.S. intelligence, just to take a backward step, in the book we describe Netanyahu, this pretty astonishing meeting where he comes to the White House Situation Room and essentially pitches President Trump on his plan for a regime change war with Iran. And he's got, on the screen behind him, he's got the head of Mossad, Israeli generals, and he lays out scenarios, including the Kurds coming across, helping to overthrow the regime, and a video montage which has potential replacement leaders in Iran, including Reza Pahlavi, who's the son of the last Shah. So they absorb all of this, and overnight the CIA does an analysis on it. And the skepticism was in a very, I wouldn't say narrow because it's pretty important, but it wasn't like they said, we can't achieve any of these objectives. We can't degrade or dismantle the ballistic missiles. We can't do anything to suppress Iran's defense industrial base. The really hardcore skepticism concerned the regime change scenarios. And I'll tell you, everyone on the Trump team basically was skeptical about this. Vance happened to be the one who vocalized that most aggressively with Trump, but others did too at different times, and particularly that intelligence, Ratcliffe and Rubio expressed skepticism to President Trump about it. Look, people will debate about how and why we went to war, but every piece of reporting I've done and everyone I've talked to in the inner circle, and I think Trump has made this clear in different ways maybe less bluntly publicly, is that he had a feeling, he had a gut feeling that this Iranian regime would collapse quickly. And even if it wasn't going to end up in regime change, he thought it would. He thought it was worthwhile going ahead with this mission, even with the more limited objectives of trying to degrade and dismantle both their nuclear program and their ballistic missile program. So that was his thinking going in. And, you know, he did hear a range of skeptical views, but I will say, expressed to him in a particularly forceful way, with the exception of J.D. Vance.
Everybody wants to talk about 2028 horse race. We've probably given it too much attention on this show. I know your book is about the first year, but what can you glean from that first year as we head into the midterms? What is the mood inside this White House? What are they thinking? Are the strategies that you expect them to employ heading into November? Are they worried? Are they frustrated? Are they confident? What's the mood?
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously worried. I mean, these are smart political operators. Presidents always, their party always tends to, history shows they tend to perform, not always, but almost always tend to underperform in midterm elections. So all of those factors, and then of course the cost of living, you know, I could just rehearse the litany, but you've heard it, the Iran war certainly hasn't helped. But to the extent that they're hopeful, optimistic, in some cases more confident, it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Senate map is very, very favorable to Republicans. And a lot of these races that Democrats are talking about winning, they're tough. I mean, you tell me what the layup is in the Senate for Democrats. I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you what the layup is. Maine, yes, I get it. Democrats generally do well in Maine, but Susan Collins has her own brand there. She's a very formidable candidate. Ohio's a red state. I understand. I think that they have a strong candidate there, but it's a red state. That's a hard win. Iowa's a red state. These are not like slam dunks for the Democrats. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is in the House, look, it's a huge uphill climb for the Republicans to hold the House. They all understand that. But the effort by James Blair and others to redraw the maps has definitely helped them. The structural advantages are definitely on their side. So, and they've got... Here's the other thing that people aren't really talking about, I think, nearly enough. For the first time in my memory, the Republicans have an overwhelming financial advantage. And a lot of it is because of the shift in Silicon Valley and the crypto money and the changing landscape in the donor community, which I think is really under-indexed. So you can tell a story where things are much more favorable to them, even though the overall environment is pretty terrible.
Well, I think that's a really fair telling of events there. Jonathan Swan, New York Times reporter, author of the new book, Regime Change. And, you know, that title, man, given what's happened in Iran, is almost freaky, Jonathan. And by the way, those are the marching orders. Get gas under 4, get oil prices down, and wrap up that war, because that's the big drag. We can do that. A lot of things open up. Jonathan Swan, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
The tension hung in the air, a palpable thing. With 2 down and runners on the corners, the batter crowded the plate, and the pitcher waited for his sign. He got it and unleashed a fastball, very high and very inside. The batter ducked, both benches leapt to their feet, and the umpire issued a warning. Now, with the count at 3-2, and the prospect of a brawl very real, the man behind the microphone knew exactly how to play it. It all comes down to this, ladies and gentlemen, the moment of truth. This epic confrontation where 2 men meet on the field of battle, but only one can prevail. In kitchens and living rooms across the country, fans leaned into their radios and held their collective breath as the pitcher went into his stretch. The runner on first bolted for second. The pitcher ignored him and served up a wicked slider. The batter swung and sent the ball deep into left field, but just fouled. The crowd groaned, but stayed on their feet. The catcher walked to the mound for a quick conference. The batter stepped back into the box and waited for the sign he wanted. He got it. This time, a changeup and another foul ball high into the cheap seats. The announcer described the chaos as 2 men in the stands fought for the souvenir. painting a picture that came alive in the minds of all those who listened. But the drama was just getting started. The next 3 pitches were all foul balls, each sent to a different part of the stadium. So were the next 3 pitches after that. So were the next 3 after that. It was an extraordinary opportunity for the tall Irish kid with the radio voice and the Hollywood smile, and he made the most of every second. The batter stepping out of the box at the last moment to disrupt the pitcher's timing. The pitcher prowling the mound like a caged tiger, determined to get into the batter's head. Each pitch had become a chess match, a steely test of wills brought to life by the announcer's urgent baritone, a voice that dripped with anticipation and possibility. Another foul ball, and another after that, and another after that. Finally, after 14 foul balls, half a dozen trips to the mound, and nearly 12 minutes of unrelenting tension, the man behind the microphone set the scene for the final time. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Another moment of truth in this battle royale. Another payoff pitch in this eternal showdown. This operatic contest of wills. Both men are exhausted, and both understand exactly what they must do. Here's the windup, and here's the pitch. It's a strike, fast and hard, right down the middle, and the side is retired. And so ended one of the most unusual at-bats in the history of baseball. A called third strike on a batter of no great consequence, from a pitcher of no particular acclaim, in a game of no great importance, chronicled for posterity by an announcer who made the whole thing up. It's true, the batter did strike out, but all those foul balls and everything in between, that was a figment of the sportscaster's imagination. You see, in those days, baseball games were called by announcers in radio stations, far from the actual ballpark. They sat in small gray rooms behind large gray microphones, waiting for a telegraph operator to send them the play-by-play, which they would then bring to life as best they could. But when this particular telegraph signal was interrupted in the middle of this particular game, this particular sportscaster, he didn't panic. The man behind the microphone closed his eyes and called the game exactly the way he imagined it, and the fans loved him for it. And so, decades later, it came as no great surprise when America sat down to watch the biggest game of the year and listened with rapt attention to the play-by-play delivered by the now legendary broadcaster, a man who understood the importance of choosing just the right words at just the right time. Once again, the tension hung in the air, a palpable thing, and the prospect of a brawl seemed very real. And once again, when the moment came for the payoff pitch, the words he chose did not appear on his teleprompter or on the approved transcript on the podium before him. No, the words he chose on that particular day were his and his alone.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
This was no game, but those words were a strike nevertheless, thrown fast and hard and right down the middle, delivered extemporaneously by the man behind the microphone, a man who knew exactly how to play it. The 40th president of these United States and the most influential sportscaster of all time, Ronald Reagan. Anyway, that's the way I heard it.